Well, happy Tuesday, brothers and sisters. Thank you for joining me for today's devotion, whether you're watching the video on YouTube or somewhere else or listening to the podcast. I am so thankful for you and your participation with us in this Bible reading plan. Today, we are in the book of Exodus chapter 24. Exodus chapter 24. This is a chapter that, is a beautiful story of God's people encountering God. In Exodus, Moses makes several trips up and down the mountain of God there at Sinai. And here, God tells Moses to bring Aaron and his two oldest sons, who, remember, Aaron and his descendants would be the priests, so Aaron and his two oldest sons, and 70 elders, 70 leaders of the Hebrew people up on the mountain, but not all the way. So what happens is, before they make their way up the mountain, Moses leads the Hebrew people in a worship service, if you will, at the bottom of the mountain, in which they agree to obey God and serve God. You remember back in chapter 20, God orally gave them the 10 Commandments. And here they're having this worship service, and they are reaffirming as a people their commitment to God. And then after that, this group of 74 people, the 70 elders, and Moses, along with Aaron and Aaron's two oldest boys, make their way part way up the mountain. And when they get up there, God says, now, Moses, in a moment, you're going to go on up. Later, you're going to come on up on the mountain. I'm going to give you the 10 Commandments that I've already orally spoken. I'm going to give them to you in written form on stones, on tablets. And But before that happens, before Moses goes on up, that group of 74, which includes Moses, they have a special time of worship with God. And it says in verse 10 that they saw God. Halfway up that mountain, they saw the God of Israel. It's not that they saw his face, but they caught a glimpse of some form of God. And it says in verse 10, under his feet there appeared to be a pavement of sapphire as clear as the sky itself. Yet, in verse 11, he did not stretch out his hand against the nobles of the sons of Israel, against that group of 70 elders. In other words, he didn't kill them, because you can't see God and live. And they saw God, and then they ate and drank. And the ate and drink doesn't mean they had a party. That is a covenant meal. In other words, on behalf of the people of Israel, who at the bottom of the mountain had just worshiped and committed themselves to God, here the 70 elders, along with Moses, Aaron, his two sons, after this encounter with God, this seeing some form of God, they have a covenant meal where they sit down and they eat and they drink. And it was something that was done in ancient cultures to signify a covenant, a contract, an agreement. So they were doing this to, if you will, celebrate the covenant between God and the Hebrew people. And then apparently what happens is God says, Moses, it's time for you to come on the mountain. So this group goes back down to the foot of the mountain, to the base of the mountain, and Moses puts Aaron and Hur in charge of the Hebrew people while he's going to be up on the mountain. And he takes Joshua with him, and they go back up on the mountain. And Joshua, as you know, stays about halfway up on the mountain. And then Moses goes on up and has this time of 40 days with God, in which he receives not only the 10 Commandments written on stone, but all the other regulations and laws. And we read about that in chapters 25, 26, 27, and so on. But here's what I want to focus on for just a real quick moment. When this group of 74 are halfway up the mountain and they see God, I want you to notice the description again that we read a moment ago. In verse 10 in chapter 24, they saw the God of Israel, and under his feet there appeared to be a pavement, a sapphire, clear as the sky itself. Excuse me. When I was reading that, I thought about some of the other descriptions of God in the Bible, the book of Ezekiel, but in particular the book of Revelation, because this brief description of God's presence here, his feet walking on this beautiful crystal clear sapphire that looked like the sky, reminiscent of the descriptions of heaven in Revelation. But the difference is when we read those descriptions in Revelation, it's actually in heaven. Here, God's presence is on this mountain out in the Sinai Peninsula, a barren place. And what hit me, what really struck me, was what made the mountain look like heaven is the same thing that makes heaven look like heaven. And it's not the place, it's God who's there. What makes it heaven, what makes it look like heaven is the presence of God. Here is God on this mountain, and when they saw him walking, they saw something similar to what we will see in heaven. What makes it a place heaven is not the place. What makes it heaven is God's presence. And I realized that's also what makes a life beautiful. It's the presence of God in a person's life that changes them, and they begin resembling Jesus. And the more we resemble Jesus because of the presence of God in our life, the more beautiful our life is. The more attractive we are to other people. Because wherever God is, there is beauty. If God is present, ugliness will flee, sin will flee, pain will flee. When God is present, there is beauty. And that makes me want the presence of God in my life more and more every day. Hope it does you as well. Hey, God bless you. I look forward to being with you tomorrow. We're going to skip ahead a few chapters. If you want to read and get ready, our Bible reading plan calls for us to be in chapter 32 tomorrow. I'll see you then.